stoppage with. I just work so many different things and just trying to like get better all the time that, you know, I'm able to go in and kind of pull something new out the bag like that.
She didn't arrive with a spotlight. She arrived with a silence that felt like pressure, the kind you don't notice until the room has already shifted. Before anyone knew her name, before analysts learned how to pronounce it cleanly on broadcast, Dakota Ditcheva was already sharpening something inside herself that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with inevitability. While the sport waited for the next loud personality to grab the microphone and promise meteoric greatness, she was in cold rooms, in empty gyms, perfecting the kind of craft that makes promises unnecessary. Her rise didn't begin with hype. It began with repetition, isolation, and a stubborn refusal to ever let herself be ordinary. She didn't talk much then, and she still doesn't now. It wasn't shyness. It wasn't modesty. It was the awareness that every second spent speaking was a second you could have used to get better. Her teammates understood it long before the public did. She wasn't aloof. She wasn't unreachable. She was focused, pulled toward progress like gravity. When she trained, her expression barely shifted, even when the sweat hit the mats and the cardio sessions left others gasping. She moved like someone who wasn't just learning a sport but decoding it, piece by piece, until the cruel geometry of combat made sense in her hands. Those early days in England shaped her more than any single victory ever could. The gyms were rough, the air thick, the padding worn from years of fighters who had come through dreaming of glory. But Dakota had never been chasing glory. She was after something colder, something cleaner. Control. Not just over opponents, but over herself, her reactions, her discipline, her evolution. In a sport where emotion drives everything, anger, fear, adrenaline, she refused to let any of it contaminate her precision. She fought like someone who believed emotion was a liability, something that belonged to amateurs and dramatics, not to technicians. By the time the wider MMA world finally noticed her, it was already too late. The storm had formed long before anyone looked up to see it. They expected another prospect, another up-and-comer who could maybe make some noise if she caught the right opponents. Instead, they found a fighter whose composure felt unnerving, whose confidence felt earned, and whose violence felt inevitable. Every bout turned into a dissection rather than a contest. Her elbows didn't just open cuts. They opened eyes. Her combinations had a rhythm that made them feel less like strikes and more like statements, each one declaring how many hours she had sunk into perfecting the smallest details. Fans whispered her name at first because they weren't sure what they were seeing. Was she calm or cold? Was she patient or predatory? Analysts tried to describe her style but failed to find simple language for it. Too controlled to be reckless, too vicious to be clinical, she existed in the space between categories. She fought like an apex predator that didn't rush the kill but studied it, learned from it, and waited for the moment where the world around her slowed into absolute clarity. The truth was simple. What made Dakota different wasn't that she could strike harder or move faster or grapple better. Many fighters could say that. What set her apart was the clarity with which she approached violence. When the bell rang, everything human about her seemed to switch off. There was no tension, no fury, no thrill. She wasn't looking for an emotional release. She wasn't looking for chaos. She was looking for execution. She fought like a surgeon operating inside a hurricane, steady hands in the middle of frenzy, guided by a plan no one else could see. As win after win piled up, the whispers turned into headlines. Her name pulsed through social media, her highlights circulating with the kind of distortion that only real fear can create. And eventually, even Dana White, the face of modern combat sports, couldn't pretend she was just another contender. In press conferences, someone always brought her up. Someone always asked where she fit in the future of the division. And every time a clip of her latest finish played across the arena screens, Dana watched with the same baffled grin that promoters reserve for fighters who are about to change their sport. He called her different. And he wasn't wrong. There was a clinical edge to her destruction, a kind of math behind her violence. She didn't rely on strength, though she clearly possessed plenty. She relied on angles, on timing, on telling reactions before they happened. It was the same kind of composure that had once defined Ronda Rousey's rise, but this time it came harnessed to a discipline built from striking rather than grappling. People inevitably drew the comparisons. Was Dakota the next Rousey? Was she the one to surpass Valentina's technical command? But what made Dakota fascinating was that she didn't participate in those conversations. She didn't acknowledge them. She didn't chase after ghosts or legacies or thrones. She carved her own. If Rousey had been the fire that melted divisions, Dakota was the cold that froze them. Rousey overwhelmed opponents with emotion and violence. Dakota overwhelmed them with stillness. Even analysts who prided themselves on understanding nuance struggled to define her fully. Dan Hardy, famous for dissecting fighters with surgical precision, reviewed her footage and concluded that she was the purest technician in women's MMA. He pointed out how she disguised her entries, how she set traps 2, sometimes 3 steps ahead. Watching her wasn't like watching a brawl. It wasn't even like watching a strategy. It was like watching choreography crafted in the mind of someone who could see the future. Her opponents felt this before the audience did. They walked into the cage believing they had prepared for her pace, her timing, her range. But once the door shut, they realized they had not prepared for her stillness. They hadn't prepared for the way she could make them feel like they were moving underwater, like their choices were already predicted, like they were reacting to a fight that had already happened. But every great fighter faces a test, and Dakota's came with the name Eileen Perez. Perez wasn't just aggressive. She was chaos incarnate, a fighter who thrived on pressure, on overwhelming her opponents with volume and heart long before they could find their footing. Fans circled the matchup like sharks sensing blood. They called it chaos versus control, fire versus ice. Perez promised to drag Dakota into the kind of ugly fight that strips technique down to instinct. She promised to expose the calm, to break the stoicism, to force emotion out of the fighter who never seemed to show any. But when the cage door shut, it wasn't Perez's arena. It was Dakota's from the first breath. Everything Perez attempted was met with a counter. Every forward surge became a pivot. Every wild exchange dissolved into the kind of clean, ruthless answers that looked like Dakota was guiding her with invisible strings. Perez wasn't just losing exchanges. She was losing her confidence. Dakota didn't rush. She didn't chase the finish. She simply dismantled Perez piece by piece, the way a mechanic might take apart an engine to show you exactly how it works. And when the elbow landed, a sharp, slicing explosion in the clinch, it wasn't just the cut that changed the fight. It was the realization that the end had been coming long before Perez ever entered the cage. The finish wasn't a surprise to anyone who had seen her footage. But it was a statement. Dakota Ditcheva wasn't a rising star. She was the one shaping the future. And the division was quickly learning that chaos had no place against someone who could turn a storm into a strategy. After that night, something in the atmosphere shifted. Dakota's aura changed. She was no longer the quiet technician carving her place in the shadows. She had become a phenomenon, the kind of fighter whose footage analysts replay frame by frame, desperate to understand the formula behind her dominance. Joe Rogan's commentary clips went viral as he described her as the most technically terrifying fighter in the sport. That description alone sparked debates. Some fans believed it wholeheartedly, calling her the future of martial arts. Others pushed back, arguing she was too mechanical, too controlled, too lacking in the unpredictable fire that draws casual fans. But while the world argued about her charisma, Dakota wasn't thinking about any of it. She wasn't reading comments or responding to commentary. Noise had never mattered to her. Noise didn't win fights. Discipline did. And while everyone else debated whether she was the next superstar, she was already back in the gym, sharpening small details, examining tiny habits, pushing to pull one more new trick out of the bag. She once said she works on so many different things, always trying to improve, always trying to evolve. That was the secret. Not the brutality. Not the precision. It was the endless pursuit of better. The refusal to settle for being great today if she could be even better tomorrow. Dana White, watching from the sidelines, understood exactly what he was looking at. A fighter who didn't just win but erased doubts. A fighter whose highlight reels didn't need slow motion to show brilliance. A fighter who could one day anchor a division, carry a promotion, and rewrite expectations. And when Dakota landed her brutal knockout, the one that spread across social media like wildfire, Dana's reaction said everything. The stunned look, the raised eyebrows, the barely concealed grin. It was recognition. It was the moment a promoter sees not just a fighter but a future megastar. Because the truth is simple. Fighters like Dakota Ditcheva don't come around often. Fighters who fuse control with cruelty, technique with timing, and calculation with destruction are rare. And when they appear, they force the sport to evolve around them. Dakota isn't here to entertain emotions. She's here to redefine standards. She didn't begin as a star. She began as a storm, a quiet one at first. But the world is listening now. And the storm is only growing. Before you go, let me ask you this. Do you think Dakota Ditcheva is on her way to becoming the most dominant technician in women's MMA? Or does she still need that signature rivalry to cement her legacy? And how do you see her stylistic coldness shaping the future of the division? If you enjoyed this deep dive breakdown, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss a new story from the fight world.